Yo, what's up, y'all? It's your boy, Marcus Bullock, the CEO and founder of Flick Shop. I'm so excited to have yet another edition of Marcus Asks. Now, today's episode is going to be so dope. I can't wait for you guys to join in this conversation. This one's going to be incredible. I got one of the homies coming in. Look, let me tell you, this is going to be dope. You want to know why this one is important? It's because today we're going to be talking exclusively about why it's important to support people who are incarcerated. And here's the thing. We built Flick Shop simply to support people who are incarcerated. So, as you already know, like, I'm super pumped about this conversation. Now, the dope part about this, I got the homie Jodi that's going to come in. She's going to come in and help us understand why it was important for her to be able to support family members and people who she knows that's incarcerated, how they do that, the organization she works for, and why they raise capital, why they raise money, why they go out into the community, why they go to these prisons, why they go into the neighborhoods, and just to be able to support people that's incarcerated. This one's important. It's so important. It's so valuable. I'm so excited. All of you guys who are joining in, if you follow Flick Shop, clearly you care about the mission of our organization. So this was going to be dope. Jodi, she's going to hop in in a quick second. But while we wait for her to join us, one of the things I wanted to be able to point out, as I do in previous episodes of Marcus Asks, is that we do this for you all, which means that I really, 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 really want you guys to join in the conversation. Make sure you jump into the comments and let us know, what are your thoughts around the topics that we're hitting on? Why it's important in supporting incarcerated family members, and what we should be doing more of to be able to support your loved one. So I won't, waste a bunch of time. It looks like she's joining in right now. This was gonna be fun. I hope you guys will have fun with me and join me on this dope conversation. Yeah, it's happening. What's going on, Jodi? How are you?
I'm good.
Oh my goodness, Jodi, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me this evening about the work you guys are doing and how you guys are so committed to supporting some of our families. How are you this evening?
Yeah, good. Except it's not evening where I am. I'm in Oregon, and it's only a little after 3 out here. So we're afternoon here. You've got a national following, man.
It's always so funny, you know what I mean? Like, when I'm working with people around the globe and folks are like, oh, wait a minute, you're like 2 hours, ahead of us, or you're 3 hours ahead of us, or Marcus, you're 7-hour difference. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot, we're East Coast and some of you guys are not.
Yep. Nope, you're out there.
What's going on out there on your side of the world? What are you seeing what's happening out there today? Like, not involved in the work that we're doing, specifically, like, how's it going? What's the weather like? What's the climate like? How are people doing?
Oops, I lost you.
And how are people thinking about their health concerns? What is going on? Tell me what's happening on your side of the world.
Well, we're Oregon, and it rains a lot right now on our side of this country. Although right now it's beautiful out there, but it won't last too long. Sun is shining. It's going to rain. We got a lot going on out here. Obviously we're all dealing with pandemic, and Oregon has been really strict about the way the pandemic. So we're all dealing with that. I don't know. I wasn't prepared to talk generally. I'm like, what are we going to talk about? We got to talk about Remnant initiatives. We got to talk about Flick Shop. We got to talk about criminal legal reform. So I'm kind of ready for that.
Thank you so much for being ready to talk about it. I'm always so excited to talk about it. I like for our guests to be able to, I could spend time and I could, read a bio, or I could talk about all of the things that we can find out about even Remnant initiatives, and when we go to their site and all that crazy stuff. But I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience, and tell us a little bit about you and why this topic is so important to you.
Yeah, so it's kind of a crazy story. Like a lot of people in the country, I lost my job in 2008. I was a healthcare IT consultant, and things just sort of fell apart with the great recession, and I thought, I'm not gonna try and stay in this world. I'm gonna go do something different. So I went to grad school, specifically to seminary, to study theology and leadership. I call myself the nice white church lady because my husband and I have always been, you know, nice white church people. And so I go to seminary, and my very first semester, this woman comes in. She's in her 70s, and she's got 5 women with her who had all done time. And she started talking about this prison ministry that she had started 20 years before that. And I just had one of those moments in life where you say, all right, something big is happening here, and I need to pay attention to this. So I ended up in 2010 starting in prison ministry. And you learn a lot about how screwed up things are in prison when people ask you to pray for them. You know, it's like, Pastor, pray for me about this, pray for me about that. And I'm thinking, why am I praying about this? Something is seriously wrong here. And one of the things that kept coming up was people that were getting ready to release and had no idea what was going to happen. Like, I'm leaving here tomorrow, I'm leaving here Wednesday, whatever it is. And I don't know. All I know is they're putting me on a bus to go to my PO. And then I don't know what's going to happen after that. So I got together with some friends from our church and said, okay, we don't want that to happen in our neighborhood. How do we keep that from happening out here? In Yamhill County, we're out in the beautiful Oregon wine country, about 25 miles southwest of Portland. And so we didn't want that to happen for people returning to our community. So we started doing kind of reentry support on a very informal basis. And then in 2017, one of my friends who had been doing this work with us, she said, how about we start a nonprofit and make this official? And so in 2017, got a 501c3, pulled together a board, and everybody either had been incarcerated or, like myself, was spending a lot of time inside the prison system or with people who had been in prison. And we pulled together a board, and we built this thing called a roadmap. Like, what do people need 6 months before they hit the gate? What do they need the day of? What do they need the week after? And that's kind of how our whole support model was formed. It was very grassrootsy, and we didn't really know what we were doing, and we made it up as we went, and it's been incredible.
I love those stories around learning how to build the plane while you're also learning how to fly it.
Yep.
Those stories are like the best stories. When thinking back to those days when you were going back and asking someone, and then someone was asking you to pray for them, and like right before you was launched, like, oh my gosh, we're going to commit to this thing. Do you remember what some of those things were they were actually to pray about?
Oh my gosh, you want to get into the ugly stuff?
I do. I want to get to the ugly stuff.
I mean, well, a couple things. One is praying for conditions the way that things were inside the prison. That was really illuminating to me. Again, nice white church lady, what do I know about what goes on in a prison? And then all of a sudden you're in there and you're listening to people.
Because you've never had any experience with anyone being incarcerated before.
No, I had a stepsister who had done time in California, but I never visited her. I didn't, we wrote back and forth, but I personally, no, I'd never been in a prison before this experience. And so, conditions, folks being thrown in the hole for stupid stuff like rolling their eyes at an officer, that just sat in my guts. Like, why is this person being locked up in solitary confinement? And again, I said I was in healthcare IT. My first degree is actually in nursing. And so I'm reading voraciously about what the conditions are that are in prison and what they do to the human soul. And then watching, again, people that look like me, nice white folk, well-resourced, upper middle class, whatever. And the way that they would talk about what was happening in prisons just clearly said, you haven't got a clue. A lot of folks that look like me and a lot of people in this country think, oh, well, you go to prison and you get a degree and you get job training and you get drug treatment and you get all of this mental health care and all of these things happen. And then you come out, and when you screw up, that's on you because we did our part. And what I learned in those early years was, wait a minute, that's on us, because we send people away thinking, well, the prison system will take care of whatever it was that led them to committing a crime in the first place. And the reality is the prison system just contributes to the factors that lead people to commit crimes in the first place. So that was a lot of what I saw when in the initial days of being there. And then I started connecting with advocacy groups that were doing kind of legislative changes. We've had a lot of exciting stuff happen out here in Oregon. I don't know if you know, in November of 2020, we were the first state to decriminalize drug possession. So instead of being sent through the legal system, we're going to send you through Health and Human Services and the healthcare system and address addiction that way. We're trying to make some inroads in changing the paradigms around how we deal with folks who become incarcerated. But man, you know, it's slow work. It is slow work.
Yeah.
And we've been defaulting to incarceration for 50 years. 50 years. So,
yeah. I mean, you know, growing up in prison, like, you know, you all, I remember thinking that as I was going through, it was the responsibility of the staff there, the administration. I went to prison as a teenager, and so going in the early, you know, my early adult life, even growing up as a teenager in the early 20s, growing up in prison, I just knew that it was going to be a replica of what I experienced in high school, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I thought it was like, yo, you know, people were going to be thoughtful about what it was going to take to help Marcus to be able to help prepare for what life was going to be like after prison. And it was a constant shockers for me to see that there were folks didn't care for me like my high school teachers or like my basketball coach. And when they would scream at me, they weren't screaming at me with love. They were screaming at me like, if you don't do this thing, you're going straight to the hole. And your mother's not going to be able to visit you. You're not going to have access to any of these things. You're not going to be able to use the phone. You know, you're going to have to live in that room that you have to eat, use the bathroom in. You're going to have to do all of the, you know what I mean? Like, you have to stay in there. You won't know the only way that you're going to know the time of day is when, based off the meals. Like, you only know it's morning because it's breakfast. You only know, you know, the day is wrapping up because the dinner tray is coming.
Yeah.
Like, that was the thing. And that was really surprising for me. It's interesting to hear that so many people have those same experiences, similar experiences, no matter where you go.
No. It blows me away. I mean, I started out, you know, leading Bible studies and hanging out in an Oregon State women's prison. And then I started getting more involved with the Department of Corrections and looking at how to improve release specific. I mean, when I learned 95% of everybody that we lock up is coming out at some point, that hit me as saying, okay, as a community leader, as a well-resourced person, as an educated person, as a church person, my faith, and I have a responsibility to make sure that people stand a fighting chance when they come back to the neighborhood, because 95% of people are coming back to the neighborhood. And so we started working with guys coming out of the men's prisons, and we have 15 prisons here in Oregon. And then you start talking to people who maybe have done time in other states, and it blows you away how alike the experiences and the circumstances are. I will say that there are some states where the dehumanization of the people that are incarcerated is more dramatic, and this is coming from folks that have done time in other states and telling me their experiences. Oregon tries. We try to treat people like human beings. But the reality is the very setting, I mean, just the built environment in a prison, that is designed to house and control dangerous people. But the vast majority in prison of people in prison are not dangerous. And so, you know, we know that the drivers of crime are addiction and untreated mental illness and exposure to violence as a child, poverty. These are the drivers trauma, childhood trauma, being raised in the foster system, not doing well in school. We know these are all the things that lead somebody to eventually become connected to the criminal legal system. And yet prison doesn't fix those things. What prison does is it just enhances them and codifies them and makes all of that okay, because it's somebody in a uniform that is now treating you that way. So that makes it okay. That makes no sense to me. And yeah, it's the nation. It's not just one space. No.
You know, thank you so much for sharing so much, like, already onto this. This is incredible. One of the things that, you know, I always wonder about, as you know, as I meet incredible people who want to go back and help support folks who are in these cells, especially as they think about what it's like to re-enter back into their communities, is I wonder, like, what gives them the thing, the audacity, the gumption, the juice, the energy to continue to keep pushing it on, because it's a long, hard, arduous fight. And in fact, if we're being completely frank, the majority of the people, the vast majority of the people in these prison cells are Black and brown people.
Oh, no.
What makes a nice white church lady want to go in and help support not only the people in these cells, but also to be able to communicate the need for others to be able to also support outside of the cells, where people that are sitting in the rooms will never hear. They won't hear about the work that you're doing to advocate for them, right? What makes the nice white church lady want to do this?
So it's several things. One is, like I said, you know, faith. Faith is a big part of that. I mean, that's kind of the whole narrative of Jesus is, I gave you grace. Now you take that, and I'll call that privilege. You take that, whatever it is that you have been given, the tools that you have to work with. Are you smart? Are you beautiful? Are you sadly, in this culture, being white is an advantage to things? Do you have money? Have you been to school? You know, whatever it is, you take that privilege, and I'll call you uniquely. All of us are called differently. You were called to do flick shop. I was called to do reentry work. I will call you into the spaces I want you to use your privilege for the betterment of the whole. Because here's the deal. If we take care of folks who are experiencing those drivers of crime, addiction, mental illness, poverty, childhood trauma, if we address those issues, lack of opportunity, then we're all safer. We all have a better neighborhood. I mean, we can't get around the fact that we're connected. I'll tell you a funny story. This guy, I'm going to call him Andrew. He was cutting up, talking to me one day. We're driving like to, I think it was get food stamps or something like that. And we're driving in my car, and he was cutting up, talking about how the best place to beat somebody up is when they're sitting on the can in prison, because there aren't cameras there to see what you're doing. And I'm just like, what are you telling me? And you know, I mean, we're laughing, but at the same time, it's like, dude. And he goes, I know. He just owned it. He said, I know, it's the stupidest thing. But there's like this culture in there. And if you don't get on with the culture, you're going to die. You know, I mean, talk about peer pressure. So he was telling me about this. And then he got real serious, and he's like, Jodi, I just want to tell you, I mean, nobody ever, you know, I've been incarcerated before. Nobody ever reached out and said, I want to help you. And you and the other volunteers at Remnant Initiatives, you wanting to help me means everything. I mean, this kid started using meth and heroin with his mom when he was 12. You know, that road to prison was laid nice and straight for him. So he's telling me, thank you, thank you. And because we'd been kind of laughing and cutting it up before, I said, well, you know why we do this, right? And he literally will know, kind of like what you just said. Why would you help somebody like me? And he's like, well, no. And I looked at him and I said, so you won't steal my car? And I'm laughing. He gets dead quiet. And he says, no. I would never steal your car. I know you. If you were some rando lady I didn't know and I was jonesing for a heroin fix, I might steal her car, but I can't steal your car. I know you. And that's the crux of this work, is how do we get folks that haven't had this experience, that don't know what's going on with prison, rubbing shoulders with people who do, so that we can all know each other and not cause harm to one another. I mean, it's deeply embedded in us learning as a society to not cause harm to one another. And we're not doing a good job with that these days.
You know, I love this. I love this. And one of the things I love about this is like, it shows, like, it points to the humanity inside of, on his side and on your side, right? He's sharing like, hey, I would never hurt anyone that I know, anyone who I saw as a human, anyone who I saw as a person who I could love, or I could share a meal with, or, you know, that wants to help support me. Like, yeah, you're my tribe, right? But others on the outside, as a result of, you know, whatever external circumstances, like, I'm super cool with going out and doing this thing in elsewhere. And especially when it's tied to something like addiction or any other, you know, racial bias, as a, you know, and how that trickles down to opportunities, the lack of social capital, lack of resource, all of those things, you know what I mean? Like, you know, they all tie hand in hand. I'm so happy to hear you point that out. Before I jump in and ask the deeper questions centered around that conversation, I think it's important for our audience to know what Remnant does. Could you talk to me a little bit about what you guys are working to accomplish over there at Remnant Initiatives?
Yeah. So the first thing is that we believe recidivism is a really low bar to set for human potential. But it's the thing everybody measures.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it's the thing everybody measures, but it's a really low bar. So yeah.
Yes.
So we have 8 things that we measure and we work toward with people who are releasing into our community. And it's, you know, those 8 things are stable housing, transportation, job opportunities, family reunification. If you've got kids that maybe you lost to the system while you were doing time, how do we get you reunited with your kids? Those kinds of things. So we have these 8 things: pro-social community, addiction support, whatnot. And so with the roadmap just tracks how are you doing toward reaching your highest level of sustainable self-sufficiency in those 8 areas. So for some people that might mean, you know, the highest level of housing I'm ever going to get is subsidized housing. For somebody else, and we have some guys, it's been a really cool year, that actually bought their own homes after doing like a big old chunk of time and starting over again.
Shout out to them.
It's amazing to be a part of that. So we have those 8 things that we look at. And the way that we do this is that first and foremost, we want to connect with you while you're inside, because as you know, the anxiety, and I know from those prayer requests, the anxiety of, I've just spent 15, 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10, whatever it is, okay, in this place where I'm just told what to do all day, okay? The model prisoner is somebody who does not think for themselves and does not problem solve. You just do what you're told. That is not the skill set you need to be able to be successful out here in free society. So we start by, let's decrease the anxiety and get into relationship with you. We try and get in there a good 4 to 6 months before somebody releases. Let's look at what assets do you have? Do you have a place to go? Do you need us to help you with housing? You know, as you pointed out, like in your TED Talk, I think it was, or in some conversation that I watched you, because you're kind of one of my heroes. In one of those, that when you're on the inside, phone calls are expensive. And you can't just make a phone call to an agency that you need to help you and leave a voicemail. They have to be willing to take your phone call, and in some cases pay for it. The communication processes for folks on the inside is just so difficult. So we help them with all of that to be able to set the stage for release day. We make sure that everybody has a ride home. Nobody coming to my neighborhood should be thrown on a bus with a bus ticket and figure it out yourself. I could not figure out how to get a bus from the prisons in my state into my neighborhood. Right. You know, and you've been in prison for however long you've been in there, just towing the line and not problem solving, and we're gonna put you on a bus. That's the first stupid thing that we do. So not us, but the system does. So we make sure everybody has a ride home. So we connect ahead of time. We make sure they have a ride home. And then on release day, and COVID has made this real rough, getting to the DMV and whatever, we make sure you have a phone, you have an email address, you have an ID, you have the clothing that you need to be able to function in free society, because you're nothing in this society if you don't have a phone and an
The
ID.
world we live in. Yeah.
It is the world that we live in. And it's also a reason that Flickshop is so awesome, because for those of us who are used to taking pictures with our phone, the idea of, oh, now I got to go to Walgreens and print this out and send it in and whatnot. So we make sure that you have the most basic tools that you need to be successful. And then we build pro-social community over time. So we're like, a lot of reentry programs or other programs will say, oh, we're a peer support organization. So we want people who have that lived experience to assist you in your reintegration journey. What Remnant Initiative specifically does is says, we want you hanging out with people not like you. Because people who don't have that lived experience have more connections. They know employers, they know landlords, they have social capital, they have connections in the community that now you have because you are now associated with them. You know, there's that old saying that says something like 70% of jobs are obtained through the acquaintance of an acquaintance.
Yep.
And, you know, my motto is, you need more acquaintances, you know? And so that's a big part of what we do. So we build that over time. It usually takes folks about a year to get to their highest level of self-sufficiency in the roadmap. And then they graduate, quote unquote. But what that really means is you don't need these services from us anymore, but we're now all community. You don't not stop being community. You just don't when you have those connections. So that's like the down and dirty of what we do and how we do it.
No, I love this. One of my good friends, and he's actually also the associate director for the Flickshop School of Business. He has a quote that he coins, is he wears it on a T-shirt even, that says, "Your network is your net worth." And what I think about what it is that you guys are building, you know, there's a level of social capital and resources that you're affording to a population of people who otherwise wouldn't have it. And the reality of it is that there's not a shortage of talent. There's no shortage of brilliance. There's no shortage, but there is a shortage of social capital and resources. And if we're being thoughtful about building a space that's more equitable for, you know, our entire country, but specifically for our returning citizens, then I think that there's a there. How do you think about the community and their responsibility to our folks, our returning neighbors that are coming back to our communities? And is there a responsibility for our community?
Heck yeah. Like I said, we all have a safer, healthier community when we engage with returning citizens. I mean, that the research is so clear on what sharing that social capital can do for a life. The potential for returning citizens to be successful is so high when you invest in these folks. I mean, it's the population that I think has the most goodness to offer to community if they just get that hand up and get those opportunities, versus if they fail and end up back in the system. It costs us all. It costs us all a lot in safety and well-being, and then also, you know, there's the money side of it. So in my community, it's very interesting because this work, I believe, is very contextual. My community is very white. My county is 73% white. It's rural Oregon. A lot of folks think that Oregon is, you know, it's a blue state, it's a woke state, it's a liberal context. The reality is the vast majority of Oregon is very conservative counties, ranchers, farming, those kinds of things. So it's a heavy lift on our part at Remnant Initiatives. And we just, you know, you start small and you work your way out. We use our networks, and then our networks, we build those networks, and then they build those networks. And you got that, you know, little starfish thing going in all those different directions, and helping people to understand. It's in the beginning, it was really difficult to try and convince my conservative community that this is good work and it's good on so many levels, whatever your political bent is or isn't. And now it's kind of cool. I mean, we've got a lot of controversy out here. It's kind of cool that our mission to assist returning citizens and to inspire and coach people with privilege and capital, social capital to engage, it has become in just 4 short years, it's become the one thing that the far left and the far right will totally come together and agree on and say, yeah, this is messed up. Prison is not working for us. We need to do something differently. So on the one hand, it's a heavy lift in helping the community understand their responsibility. But once they start piecing together, connecting the dots, whether it's through their experience with our clientele or whether it's through just listening and going, that doesn't make any sense. It's really kind of magic to see how you can pull those sides together around this issue.
I love how this conversation has become a bipartisan issue. I mean, we're starting to learn more about the impact of incarceration in our communities. Like you say, I mean, obviously, families like mine have been impacted by incarceration for decades and decades. But now, at least we're starting to shift the conversation to help understand why it's not just my mom or my grandmother, my aunts and uncles and cousins, their neighbors, their schools, their children, there's some of my nieces and nephews. And then you even alluded to it, like there's an economic impact where folks are like, wait a minute, my tax dollars are going where? I'm paying what? Like we could be paying for what? And instead of that, we're paying for this. And why? Why are we paying for that? Why is it important for us to be able to keep these people and pay for them to do this when we could be paying, or allocating those resources in other spaces to be able to help make our schools or our parks or our economic development centers, or our recreation centers, or our coding programs, or our skate parks. Don't get me on the soapbox, Jodi. You starting something here.
Oh, we're singing in the same choir. We're not preaching to the choir. We're just singing in the same choir. Maybe a little different part to a little different audience, but we are singing the same music. It's amazing when you start to see the light bulb go on. And then you start to have the deeper conversation about, all right, where are you going to engage? I mean, Michelle Alexander wrote The New Jim Crow in 2010. 2010. So that we look at how our system of incarceration, starting with the 13th Amendment and all the pieces that got, put on top of each other, right to 71 and Nixon saying, we're going to declare war on drugs. And now we've got folks from his administration saying, yeah, we knew it wasn't about the drugs. We knew we had to get the hippies, the pot smoking hippies to quit protesting the war. And we needed to get black folk to stop pushing on the civil rights and getting the vote. So we can't make those two things illegal. So let's find something we can make illegal. And that was the birth of the war on drugs. And the more that people learn, whoa, wait a minute, that's what that was about? And now we have 70 million people in this country with a criminal record. It's hard to find folks that don't know somebody who has been pushed through the system in some way or another. And what's really funny about it? I mean, we have all the data, and statistically, we know that white folk get off easier as they intersect with the system. We know that. It's been proven. But what I don't hear when I'm talking to white folk about this is a denial of that fact. I don't, we are so far gone in what's been in our newspapers, our books and whatnot. I don't hear anybody say, well, that's not true. The system is, it's more or less fair. Everybody's connected with this in one way or another, where they can tell a story of somebody in their circles that they say, yeah, that's messed up. That did not get us where we get. We also, I mean, especially in the last, few years, 20 years or so, with the rise of the opioid crisis and big pharma and the horrible things that were done to get people addicted to, you're hard pressed to find a family anymore that doesn't have experience with somebody who's dealing with addiction. And they can all tell you sending folks to prison to deal with the addiction isn't doing the job. We know more about that. I think we're on a really cool, a wave that is just beginning to crest for some serious reform. The tricky thing, and this is what we all have got to in our networks, help people to understand. Like, I look at the First Step Act, okay? That was that federal thing where they let out, I think it was about 1,000 people or whatever. Trump signs this thing, 1,000 people walk out. You know, 999 of those folks went on to do great things in their lives, to become contributing members of community. And there's this, you know, one guy who goes out and screws it up. And that's what, and let's be clear about who this is, the folks who lobby to keep the system the way it is, they use that one off, that one failure to say, see, that doesn't work.
Yep.
And I used to think it's law enforcement, it's the DAs, it's the cops that are saying we want to keep the system the way that it is, right? It's not. It's the false narrative that is being preached and spread by the telecom industry that makes so much money on this system. Okay, the commissary.
You said it, not me.
I said it, and I mean, it's all there. I mean, I love, like, I'm sure you follow, you know, Bianca Tylek and Worth Rises and the work that they're trying to do in dismantling the for-profit phone system. I mean, but again, though, that's where Flickshop said, hey, until we can dismantle this stuff, let's make an easy way to keep people connected, because it's the connections that make that's where the real human transformation comes. And Flickshop does that. Can I tell you a story about Flickshop?
Please.
Okay.
Don't get me excited on it.
No, it's so cool. So, you know, the Dream Corps, right? Van Jones and the Dream Corps and that. And so in 2019, I had...
Shout out to my friends over at Cut 50 and Dream Corps.
Okay. So Cut 50 and Dream Corps. Cut 50... I don't even think they call it that anymore, because
they don't. It's just a whole
because it you know, the plan,
and most of the people who I knew that were there are gone now anyway. But
I know. I mean, to cut the prison population by 50%, I think it was by like 2024 or something like that, and we haven't made those inroads the way we wanted to.
No,
the folks at Dream Corps creating opportunities, you know, green energy jobs, coding jobs, for Black and brown folks, and then Cut 50 trying to get some reform in the criminal legal system and the way that we do things there. They do so many cool things. But one of the cool things that they do is they have these webinars, and you can, you know, tune in, and they have guests. And in summer of 2019, you were a guest. And we were struggling with some of our returning neighbors, getting connected with them before release. The Department of Corrections wasn't cooperating with us, and we work closely with our local parole and probation. They love us, and they want us to have access to folks preparing for release. So we're having some difficulties getting in, and of course we're trying to write letters into people or whatever. And we're sitting there on this webinar watching you talk about Flickshop and launching Flickshop, and when we all looked at each other and said, bam, that will get us directly to the people that we want to reach, so that, and give them our contact info, so then they can reach back out to us. So it just opened these doors that we had been banging our head against, trying to get through to folks to say, you don't have to be afraid of release. We're here. We want you to be successful, and we're here. The community that you are coming back to cares about you. That's the message. So Kim, who's now our board president, she was doing all the reach-ins at the time. She goes like, okay, I'm gonna cuss, ape shit over Flickshop. She's taking pictures of everything. Like, here's a picture of a burger, send it into this guy. Here's a picture of my dog looking up at you, send it into this guy. Here's a picture of this. So she is like, a year later, she's at going to nursing school in Kodiak, Alaska. Okay. She's married to a guy that works up on the ice fields and stuff. We're talking like manly man, you know, shoot your own meat kind of people, right?
Yeah.
And so she's in the sporting goods store. It's called, you know, Ray's Sporting Goods. This is the store you walk in, and there's this monster Kodiak bear stuffed staring down at you while you're like looking at slippers. And so she's in the sporting goods store, and they're walking through, and her husband goes, that's cool. And he points out, so take a look at this, right? This is a Carhartt Christmas stocking. Okay. This is like the Christmas stocking for your shoot my own meat kind of a man.
Yeah.
And her husband goes, that is so cool. And she takes a picture of it. And just a few weeks before that, she had had a call with a guy who he'd been back and forth to prison so many times. He was just in despair. And she told him about the services we offer and all the things that we could do. And he said, you know, you don't understand. I'm going to get out. I'm going to fight with my PO. And in a matter of months, I'm going to be back here. This is how it always goes. This is just the way it rolls. So she sends him this flick shop of this Carhartt stocking. And a couple weeks later, we get an email from the PO going, hey, for whatever reason, this guy has decided to change his tune on getting services from you guys. Can you make another reach in? And so Kim calls him, gets on the phone with him, and he says, I want to thank you for that picture. Wow. Just seeing a stocking, you know, a funny stocking like that made me think, maybe I can just hang on till Christmas. And maybe after Christmas, I can just take it time. Dude, that was 2 years ago. And he's never gone back.
Wow.
Never gone back. That simple human connection. A picture's worth 1,000 words to say, there's a world out here waiting for you. It's a paradigm changer. Don't ever forget that what you're doing, I mean, it's changing people's life stories.
Thank you so much for that, Jodi. Thank you so much for that. You know, working in an office where we're working on building tech, and, you know, every now and again we get an opportunity to be able to get out in the field, and maybe there's an organization that we can connect with and learn from, but be able to hear the real life stories are so meaningful. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for sharing that. Jodi, before I let you go, I want to poke the bear a little bit. I need to poke the bear a little bit.
Sure.
On this one. Let me ask you a question. How do your peers, the one and your family members, and your closest friends and your family members, how do they feel about the work that you're doing and the position that you're taking on wanting to support people that are incarcerated, knowing that historically, culturally, people that you talked about before, just, you know, several minutes before, would typically not be the person who you are now? Like you even said, even yourself, you had no idea until you started going to these facilities,
right,
and meeting the human beings, hearing the stories, meeting people, and feeling the love. How do your friends and your family feel about the work that you're doing?
You know, some folks, well, there's two things that I often get. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are just supportive. The minute they get just a few fun facts, they're like, oh my gosh. And those pieces come together. But for folks that are resistant comes in pretty much two flavors. One is personal accountability. You know, people need to be held personally accountable for their behavior. And when I get that pushback, it's like, well, what about accountability? People need to be held accountable for their behavior. Oftentimes I will use a metaphor like raising children. Like, it's kind of like when you're raising your kids, everybody knows that if you've got a misbehaving little 2-year-old or 4-year-old, the best thing you can do is put them in timeout, right? And if you want a really effective timeout, well, then you're going to put it there for days. Just put the kid in timeout for days. Oh, with a really misbehaving 12-year-old. And then all of a sudden you see people going, okay, accountability, yes, but maybe prison's not the right way to hold people accountable. That's the one piece of resistance that we'll get. The other one is often an issue of safety. People ask me, do you help sex offenders? I'm like, yeah, I do. And then when you start giving them, again, facts around the vast majority of folks that are on the sex offender registry are there for stupid reasons. And the sex offender registry has done nothing to make any of us safer. And your kid is more likely to be molested by a family member or somebody than somebody down the street. And again, meeting those pieces of resistance with knowledge. I mean, knowledge is power, and helping people to understand it's not as clean as you think. Like back to sex offenders, I'm like, You know, and I actually know a case like this that's happening right now. That kid who was 17 with the 15-year-old girlfriend who then turned 18, who then the school counselor had to turn in because now he's 18 and she's 15, and now he's facing 6 years in his life completely being ruined. Is that what we want? And then people go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. No, that's not what we want. So those are usually the two ways that people give me resistance: personal accountability on the part of people that break the law, and then safety issues for what we do. And then it starts a dialogue. I had a boss years ago that said, you know, your enemy is not resistance. If people are resisting, they're engaged. Your enemy is apathy. And that's the thing you should be most concerned about, is people that just really don't care. So yeah, so those are, you know, two ways that we get resistance and two ways that we deal with helping people to get beyond that.
Nah, thank you so much for that. Let me ask you. I got a couple of rapid fire questions that I know, and I love this. Our audience is like, yo, this is it's a dope conversation. I see a bunch of amens and preach down there.
I know,
you.
it's awesome.
Like, you doing your thing out there. You got people like engaged, and I'm excited that you're able to drop some of these jewels on us tonight. So thank you for taking us some time, or in your time this afternoon. But thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us about this. Let me ask you, what are some of the best ways that others can get involved as they think about ways to help support returning citizens?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we've tried to do is help people understand how population of returning citizens is connected to some social justice issue that probably is bothering you, whether it's child welfare, foster care, whether it is, you know, crime, safety, suicide, sexism, racism, it's all there. So what I usually will do is, rather than, you know, having a conversation with somebody and saying, hey, you should do X, I'll ask them, like, how much time do you have? What are you good at? Where can you engage? I mean, we have people that flat out say, I love the work that you're doing, and I will help do release day drives like once a quarter. That's it. That's all you're getting from me. Fine. Good. I have others that say, oh, I don't want to do those release day drives, but I can help with transportation, or I know employers or whatnot. So we work really hard to create those relational networks when we're asking people for help. Of course, we always need money. We don't get, I mean, we get very little government funding. We get a whopping $1,000 a month from the government. We spend on average about $300 per person who comes out. And that's just because in Oregon, there's no money in our state and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So donations are always great. And you can go to our website, rem-in.org. That's short for Remnant Initiatives, you know, remn.org. And there's an easy way to donate there. So there's that.
Hold on, give us that website again, so make sure that we don't miss that.
Okay, REM as in Mary, and then dash IN as in Nancy.org. Yep. You can Google search us and we'll come up too. So that's always helpful. So thanks for letting me get that plug. But here's the deal. What I really emphasize with people, the place that they can make the biggest impact in supporting returning citizens and supporting people who are incarcerated in this country, is with your vote. Show up. Do not be swayed by the profiteering machine that is trying. I mean, the politics of fear, they're going to try and make you afraid so that you will not be courageous enough to say mandatory minimums, they gotta go. Okay, solitary confinement, that needs to get abolished. The UN defines any solitary confinement over 15 days as torture, not cruel and unusual punishment, torture. And yet right now, 80,000 people in this country are spending a heck of a lot more time in the hole than 15 days. So when we look at initiatives within our own context, and that's going to look different in your state than it looks in my state, vote differently, think differently about the human potential for people who screw up. I love to quote Brian Stevenson, each of us is more than the worst thing we have ever done. I know I should have a criminal record. But when I was doing drugs and I was a messed up teen, I lived in a nice white neighborhood, and the cops weren't trolling my community. They knew that our daddies would make it hard for them to get those convictions that the feds were incentivizing them to get back in the early days of the war on drugs, actually in the mid days of that. That's the biggest impact. Read deeper, think more deeply, and vote differently so that we can dismantle this thing called mass incarceration.
Jodi, when I'm on that side of the country, we're going out to dinner. I'm taking you, I'm buying you dinner. This was an incredible.
Yeah.
Say it again?
We got a great guest room.
I can't wait for it. Yeah, guys, thank you guys so much for joining us. Jodi, thank you also for joining us. Thank you for exposing how you got to a place where you were able to feel with so many people. I'm so grateful for that. Our audience always, they want to look for those valuable tidbits that even allow for them to be able to come and get involved and hear themselves inside of your story. I mean, I'm sure there are different people that are listening here and they're gonna be like, oh man, I get this, I heard this, or I didn't realize that this was an issue. And while I think that we would like to highlight all of the atrocities that we hear about when we start hearing about the justice system, there's a piece that a lot of us don't talk about, which is, all right, they're there. How do we think about supporting them while they're there and then helping them prepare them for successful release when they get out so that they don't go back? You did a great job with helping to pinpoint what some of those things are that we can do to be able to make that happen. I'm so grateful for you joining us. I hope that I can figure out a way to get you back here again and continue to shed light on the work that you guys are doing over at not only at Remnant Initiatives, but here's the thing. One of the reason why I asked you about your family members and your friends is because what I also learned is that the dinner table, the Christmas, the Christmas Eve, Christmas Eve cookie baking marathon with the children, the after church functions, like that's the place where the conversations are being had that shift the policy decisions and that shift legislation simply because we have the control over this. You did an incredible job with helping us understand how you guys are tackling it over there in Oregon. I'm so excited to be able to have this moment with you. Thank you again for educating us all and sharing time with us.
The pleasure is ours. I mean, your life story is living testimony to what happens when a human being it does time and then says, what can I offer? I mean, every one of us has something to offer the whole. And so thank you for being just a walking, talking, living, breathing inspiration.
Thank you. Listen, let me tell you something. I wish I could claim a lot of it. I got a praying mother and a praying grandmother that's, that was there to, to be one of a couple of people that were there to help save my life when I don't know if I was on the track to be able to see what the possibilities were after prison. But I think that it's great to be able to, for me to acknowledge that because what it does also show is the value of support, social capital and resources. Thank you again, Jodi. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I love what you guys do. Just keep doing you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. If you guys haven't heard, I want to make sure, go back. If you join us here on IG, we're going to post this on our Flickshop IG page, but we'll also post the same video on our YouTube page. So maybe you may want to rewind a couple of sections back to learn how you can actually get involved, because I think Jodi did a great job of helping us understand ways that we can all get involved as a community. Jodi, it was great meeting you here tonight. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining us for another edition of Marcus Sags. This was awesome. I absolutely love our community. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Good night.
All right, goodbye.
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 Good night.
All right, goodbye.